Hi everyone, welcome to my channel and to this time-lapse version of a waterfall in soft pastel. I'm trying out the new Canson velvet paper again with this one, and I'll try and share some of my thoughts about that paper as well throughout this short video. There will be a full tutorial series from this over on Patreon, but if you enjoy this here on YouTube, then please do hit that subscribe button. So that was a little view of the place that I'm painting, the day I went with my big camera to take some good photos. And now I'm back in my much quieter studio space, and I'm working on the new Canson velvet paper. Actually, I really wanted to try something different on this, still testing my way on this paper. And some papers are better for certain subject matters, and then sometimes you'll have a different paper for different types of subjects, like, for example, the difference between animal portraits or landscapes. And I'm keen to test this paper right across the board with all of the different subjects that I like to paint. And so far, I've enjoyed absolutely everything on this paper. So the first thing I'm doing is blocking in some darks. There's a lot of underlying darkness in this, even though you can see a lot of vibrant colours then on top. But to really get those lighter and more vibrant colours to shine out and to create the sense of the light and shade, I need to go dark with this first layer. So I chose the brown colour of the Canson paper just to give it a warm underlying glow. And I will likely get around to trying some of the other colours that this paper comes in, but I usually favour quite a warm coloured paper, perhaps a mid-tone usually, but this is just a little bit darker than I normally use, and it's really nice for something that does have a lot of depth and darkness in it. So painting rocks has always been a sticky point for me. There are times they work out and there are times that they look a bit blobby. And this time I made a conscious effort to do things a bit differently. So I really tried to use the pastels on their sides and use the lovely texture of the surface of the paper. Now, the surface of the paper is quite uniform. So unlike on pastel mat, sometimes I find on pastel mat you get a little bit of a scratchy looking mark that doesn't look even. And that's when you're scumbling, when you're trying to scumble some colour over another colour. And then sometimes if you blend on pastel mat a little too much, the colours will mix quite easily. Now on this paper, I get a bit more of a sense of how velour behaves, for example, Hahnemuhl velour paper. And this is why I think it's got some similarities to velour, because on velour you can scumble with the side of the pastel and create this really uniform film of colour where you can still see the other colours underneath. And it was one of my favourite attributes of the velour paper. I really loved using that, and I kind of missed that on pastel mat. So I'm delighted that this paper lets me do that. It's got a really lovely surface texture, and that helped me a lot with painting these rocks because that was what I was trying to create this time. Instead of painting rocks a bit more solidly like I might have done in the past, I decided to really try and layer up thin films of colour and to not lose the grain or the tooth of the paper, allow that to help me create the rough surface of the rocks. So lots of lovely vibrant colours as well, deep rich purples, lovely dusky blue violets, and right through to the lighter lilac tones. But then also some real red earth colours coming into the rocks as well. I love the photo reference because it has a real glow. And when you're actually in the place, because I'm not the best photographer or videographer, so the colours don't really come across that well in my photographs. And that's where I can use my memory of being there and enhance the colours as I paint it. So I can take a little bit of artistic license with the colours that I see. So this is a little bit bigger. I've been working on smaller studies recently. I've done quite a few smaller waterfall studies as well, just gearing up towards this bigger one. This is just over 16 inches tall. So not enormous, but big for a landscape these days because I've been working on tiny studies, just getting to grips with using my pastels in different ways, really trying to expand further the way I use pastel. And in this piece, you'll notice that I didn't pick up any pastel pencil. This is entirely done with the bigger sticks, and I've been using mostly unisons, but with a good number of Terry Ludwigs thrown in here as well. I really like some of the dark Terry Ludwigs, and I like some of their greens. I can never have enough greens. So there's some bits of red and green also coming into the rocks. This bit of highlight that I'm adding on that main shiny rock at the bottom, I actually end up coming back at the very end of the painting and toning that down a little, even though it's as bright as that in the photo reference. I feel like the photo is probably a little bit overexposed in those areas. And when I stood back at the end and really analysed the painting, I did decide to tone down some of those brighter areas on that bottom rock and to let the top of the waterfall be the brightest point of the painting. So you've really got to watch your tonal values as you're painting. And the same applies within all of the foliage, all of the leaves and the vines growing over the rocks. I've created a really good dark base to add those lighter leaves on top. But then I've also got to study the photo reference and see which leaves are actually catching more light, because we get this dappled sunlight coming down the rock face and just catching the tips of certain leaves, and I really wanted to try and create that. So in the full tutorial series, there's a lot to talk about in this one. I'll be talking, as always, a lot about my colour choices, why I chose those colours, what effect I hoped that would give. And for me, this piece was all about practicing painting rocks. As I said at the start, rocks have always been a little bit difficult for me. Maybe because in the past I've tried to put too much detail into them. And that's where I'm really experimenting with my soft pastel sticks now. You can get such a range of different marks and effects just from one little chunky piece of pastel. So colour and mark making both being pushed in this painting. And at the same time experimenting on this paper, which is still relatively new to me. So I'm just getting to the point now where I'll come back and work on the waterfall itself. We've got that very bright section of water at the top where it's really just catching the sunlight. The sunlight is up behind the waterfall somewhere, so we're down in the shadows mostly. And I'm bringing those cooler blue violets and lighter lilac tones further down the waterfall, creating the spray. And that's a mixture of using the pastel a little bit on its side, dragging it very lightly across the surface of this paper, which, as I said earlier, gives a very nice, rough texture. And from a distance, that almost looks like water spray as well. And then I'm just adding little droplets coming out, spurting out, changing the colour for where the water's still catching that sunlight from the top of the waterfall. And then dipping down into the lilacs and the blue violets. So it's not the most watery waterfall. I went to this place at the beginning of summer. I know if I go back in winter time, I will get the waterfall when it's at its fullest. But I thought this was still quite an interesting study, showing how the spray of the water really leaps off some of the rocks as it hits them on the way down. So there's really just the left side of the painting to do now, and that is a lot of leaves. So another thing that often really stumps me is leaves, foliage, branches, and rocks. So this was a real challenge. But with those darker colours on the base layers, that allows all of my nice greens to show up really well. And instead of just going really fast at this and making lots and lots of marks, I actually did the opposite. I really took my time and I thought about my marks before making them. Sometimes painting looser isn't about painting faster. Quite often you'll consider the marks that you make a lot more. So I tried my best with the leaves to not slip into uniformity, to keep them looking natural, and again to try and filter that sunlight down through the branches, just picking out some brighter sunlit leaves here and there. So on the whole, I'm really pleased with this because I'm really pleased with how the paper performed. I will keep experimenting on this paper and try out some different subject matters. I'd like to try a people portrait on it. It'd be good to try some human skin. But I would also like to continue on my journey with painting landscapes. I've worked on this a lot over the last couple of years, and hopefully I will take my palette of colours to this beautiful location and do some plein air very soon. So when I do that, I'll bring my camera and share that experience with you. But the full tutorial from this coming very soon on Patreon. If you liked it, then please do subscribe here on YouTube as well. But thanks very much for watching, and until next time, happy pasteling.